Good afternoon to you. Mark Suttoth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for the 21st of September 2015. Let's start today's tour off with a look at climatology. This last third of the month, you can tell we have a lot of activity overall in the Atlantic Basin, quite a few points of origin areas in the eastern Pacific as well. But this season is a little different than the norm because we have this El Nino, the abnormal warming of the tropical Pacific here, quite a bit above where it should be, and that kind of distorts the pattern. A lot more activity out in this area than you have in the Atlantic Basin, although we've had quite a bit of activity, even though it struggled here in what we call the main development region of the Atlantic. Danny, Erica, Fred, and most recently, of course, with Ida sitting out here. Kind of not looking for that to happen during El Nino seasons through this region. A lot more subtropical activity is what we expect. But, you know, every year is different, and you never know what you're going to get. But check this out. This is what it looked like on June the 1st when we started the season. Notice all this cold water relative to average in the Atlantic Basin, and the Pacific was just starting to warm. And now we go back to where we are today. Very warm in the Atlantic compared to where we were in June. And of course the Pacific has done its thing of becoming quite a strong El Nino event. I do expect that this will weaken and eventually dissipate towards spring and summer of next year. And that should make for an interesting 2016 hurricane season. But we're still in this hurricane season and we have a few things to talk about. Here is Ida, low-level center in here somewhere probably. Convection displaced off to the south and east. Now Ida is going to be on the maps for the next several days more than likely, and if we look at that tracking map you can see that it's just going to kind of mill around, very slow movement here, and then eventually get up into the open Atlantic waters here well to the east of Bermuda and probably become a hurricane, have kind of upper level traffic going by to the north, different fronts coming by, upper level lows in the region, and once those clear out, Ida should strengthen to become a hurricane and maybe a fairly strong one according to some of the global models. Now looking out in the west, or towards the west anyway, in the eastern Pacific, tropical depression 16E over the Mexican landmass now. The remnants of this going to move into Arizona. You don't see that too often with a 2 or 3 day forecast cone into the southwest United States, but nevertheless there it is. We'll take a look at what's going on with that out west. Pretty heavy rain in store, ongoing in fact in parts of the region, and that's going to produce some flash flooding. This is a pretty good image to show you what's going on here. I'll zoom in on it. This is the remnant circulation here. Pretty good rain shield moving into the desert southwest. You can see that on this wonderful sort of mosaic, if you will, of the entire, see, it's got the whole United States in here. I love this. Really gives you an idea of the scale of a rain event. So from the western parts of Texas all the way over just almost into Southern California, pretty good rain amounts coming in through here, 1, 2, 3, 4 inches of rain. There's an upper level low sitting off the coast of California that'll help to sort of kick off some of this energy as well. So just be aware, you do have the I-10 corridor coming up out of West Texas through El Paso, Las Cruces, Tucson, Phoenix, and beyond. And then there's that one stretch in here somewhere where it's still damaged, I think, from some flooding back in June. So just be aware that this is out there, and take it easy if you're traveling through that region. Now, the Madden-Julian oscillation has been basically in what we call the null phase, or basically a indiscernible MJO anywhere around the globe. And what does that mean? Generally speaking, we haven't had any widespread areas of favorable upward motion in the atmosphere, and that has led to a pretty quiet September globally for tropical cyclone activity. Now the GFS indicating maybe a little bit of an amplification here towards the western hemisphere, which would favor the western Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico perhaps. Now the Euro, the ensemble members, and the operational, which is the green, I do believe. You see the envelope here of the different ensemble members. Not as enthusiastic with that amplification. So we'll see. You know, it's getting to be the time of year as I was showing you on the points of origin map here, that the Western Caribbean and the Gulf becomes the focal point. You can still have a lot of development out this way, but this is going to get shut down pretty soon here, and then this region will be the area to watch towards the end of the hurricane season, more than likely. Now, speaking of all that, let me go through the next week of the GFS surface maps here. This is valid tomorrow morning, so Tuesday morning. Weak little area of low pressure forming off the Carolina coast. Have to watch this for the possibility of increased easterly flow coming in here, piling up the water at times of high tide, especially as we approach the full moon. And if we get these big highs coming out of Canada, you sort of squeeze that pressure gradient in between. So that's something to be aware of. Here's Ida sitting out here. And again, this is just going to kind of stand in one area for the next several days and try to strengthen over time. Moving ahead now, this is 5 days out. And again, here's that sort of disorganized low into the mid-Atlantic states, high pressure coming out of Canada, and you get that squeeze play going on. Something to keep an eye on, especially if you're going to go to the beach and enjoy the last bit of summer weather, what little bit there is left. Be careful in the surf. Rip currents could be an issue from the mid-Atlantic south along the Carolina coastline as well. And then we got to start watching what's happening down here in the Western Caribbean and around the Yucatan. Some of the models indicating, and the GFS included, that we get a low pressure area. This is day 7, developing somewhere in this vicinity here between the Yucatan and the Northwest Caribbean. You see Ida still sitting out here trying to organize, waiting for this traffic to go by. Let me clear the shot and start it over here, give you a wider scale. I think once all of this moves out and you get this high pressure dominating the Atlantic, Ida will finally have a favorable environment to become possibly a pretty strong hurricane, but it should stay well away from any land areas. Maybe, just maybe, it can send some swells towards the East Coast and give our surfer friends out there some action. And then this system here, the only thing I have to say about it, and don't get too worked up over it just yet. I believe that upper level winds are going to be pretty strong. There's a trough that's going to carve in, and then you're going to have some pretty strong southwest flow over the top of this, so it could be more of a hybrid system, not even subtropical, just kind of a comma-shaped hybrid low over warm water, maybe getting a subtropical designation. I mean, you never know. It's still several days away, and if that MJO pulse comes into the western Atlantic basin enough and sort of widens the umbrella of favorability, it could be more interesting than just a sort of wet, breezy, pretty heavy rainmaker, actually, for the Florida Panhandle in about a week. It's just something to watch, let's put it that way. Raise one eyebrow for it. I wouldn't raise 2 eyebrows just yet. Let's look at it that way. All right, well, that's it from me for today. Hopefully you are up to date on what's happening or not happening in the tropics, whatever the case may be. I am Mark Sept for HurricaneTrack.com and, of course, for Hurricane Pro and HD. And I'll be back midweek with another update on what's happening in the tropics.